Hi, David Waldas here, creator of the HSP solution. So I want to talk to you today about the three biggest challenges that I've seen highly sensitive people come across. And the good news is that there's really one solution we'll be talking about as well that solves all of them. So before we get into those, I wanted to take a look at how our energy field is different as highly sensitive people. So as a psychic and channel and energy worker, I really see everything as energy. And so the work that we'll be doing with this will really be from that energetic perspective. So looking at our energy field, it's really what is vibrating out from us. It's how we know the world, because our energy field, while it's emitting who we are, it's also connecting us to the world. It's where we keep our sensors, or really our emotional body, that draws information into us, showing us who the world is. And so it's really unique for us. It's something that's really different for highly sensitive people than people that are just normal, everyday 3D people. And so the way that we know the world, we tend to send our emotional body out and we connect with all the different things that we're experiencing. So we get to have these really high highs, these really rich experiences, but we also are taking in these really deep challenges. And so as a highly sensitive person yourself, you probably know this experience really, really well. And it's really an interesting commonality among people who are highly sensitive, is that we can be really just on top of the world. We can see ourselves as just so important and really just see ourselves in the highest way. And then 5 minutes later, we could also see ourselves as why are we even here? And so my experience with myself, with other highly sensitive people, is that our range of self-concept is all over the place. We don't have much of a static self-concept. It's constantly shifting. And the reason for that is very clear, and it's very, again, unique to being highly sensitive. You see, as we ask the world who we are, which is what every person on this planet does, and when we send that energy out asking that question, the way that highly sensitive people receive that answer is very different. You see, we tap in with how people are responding to us. And when you tap in with how somebody's responding to us, you're getting their information, not your own. And I'm sure you've heard the concept before that when somebody's upset with you or somebody's sharing something negative, that it's so much more about them than it is about you. And that's entirely true. Yet as highly sensitive people, it's really the information that we have to know ourselves from. And so let me share a little story with you that I think will help make sense of this a little bit more. So I work a lot with people in transition. And divorce is one of those big transitions that seems to show up for people when they're really seeking out a really deeper way of knowing themselves, really seeking out moving through blockages. So I had this one client that I'm thinking of for this story, and she lives in a really wealthy community. She was married to a really wealthy man, and he just wasn't supportive of what she wanted to create in her life. And so they had 3 kids together, and she made a really bold decision because this decision wasn't real common in her community. She decided to leave her wealthy husband and move into a much smaller place, into living a life of much smaller means, and really break up a situation that many, many people in her community had worked very hard to achieve. And so there's a lot of people in her community that were in that same boat, but didn't have the guts, that didn't have the self-care, that didn't have the self-love to leave the situation, to really choose themselves. And so this woman, being highly sensitive, would go out into the community. So she'd be walking through the grocery store, and she'd come across somebody who maybe was still stuck in a situation like that and knew her story, and they'd look at her and she'd just feel this hatred come back to her. She would feel this idea of what an awful person she was, and how could she do this to her kids? How could she do this to her family? And she would go into this place of like, oh my God, I just feel awful about myself. And then she'd walk down the next aisle and there'd be another woman there who maybe had made the decision that she had, that had left a situation where she wasn't being supported. And she would project to her what a beautiful person she was. And she was talking about how she would have these self-concepts that were jumping all over the place. I'm this awful person. Oh wait, no, I'm this amazing person. I'm this role model. And so as highly sensitive people, we have those experiences, right? We don't really get to feel who we are internally because we're feeling it externally. And so for people that aren't highly sensitive, their experience is the complete opposite. They have a tougher time really getting to know how the world responds to them because they're feeling everything within themselves. So when they ask, who am I? They feel it just inside. And the way that they know other people's response to them is based on how they felt inside themselves. So they don't get to feel what somebody else is experiencing. So if somebody looks at them with disgust, like that first woman did, they go, huh, okay, I know that face that she's making, I've felt that kind of before, and this is what I feel like, when I'm feeling that, so that must be what they're feeling. It's a very separate, outside of themselves kind of experience. And then when they experience a person who's so loving and sees them as this hero, they go, okay, well, I know what that kind of feels like too, but it's all based on how they felt in the past. And so it really is about them. And so as highly sensitive people, everything's personal, right? Because everything that we experience, we're receiving the emotions of everybody around us. And so our self-concept, it's no wonder that it's all over the place, that it's everything from this heroic, that piece of I'm so proud of who I am, all the way into why am I even here? And so if you've been struggling with your self-concept, it's just another piece of this puzzle. It's part of being highly sensitive. And so I'm really excited because the work that we're going to be doing with this is actually going to be taking those sensors that are asking the world who they are, asking the world who we are, and we're going to stop putting them outside. We're going to take them away from receiving our information from everybody else that isn't even about, and we're going to turn them off and we'll open them up inside ourselves again. And when we do that, it's a really interesting experience because for the first time we actually get to feel who we are and who we are to ourselves and to experience ourselves directly. So our self-concept is really important to us for several reasons. It's not just the obvious. You know, of course we want to feel good about who we are. Of course we want to show up in a very powerful way. But our self-concept is also really clearly linked to what we manifest and to how we manifest. Because when we're caught up in these low versions of ourselves, when we're caught up seeing ourselves in negative ways, it doesn't allow us to call into our life really what matches our greatness. And so one of the really cool side effects of doing this work is we start to really clean up how we see ourselves. We start to see ourselves really as we truly are, which is going to be on the positive, higher end of the frequencies that we've experienced ourselves at in the past. And as we start to feel ourselves so clearly and so deeply, there's no confusion about who we are and what we're bringing. And I just watch people just light up and start to shine because they recognize how much the world needs them, how much it really makes sense for them to bring more and more of themselves. And it's such a cool awakening experience. It's such a cool, empowering experience. And I'm really excited for you to have that experience as well, because once you see who you truly are, once you feel who you truly are, you don't get stuck in those old traps anymore. You don't get stuck in those places of seeing yourselves in other people's eyes when they're just simply responding to their own triggers. We don't get caught up in that anymore. All right, so the next biggest challenge I want to talk about is how we often perceive everything around us as threats. And so let me explain what I'm talking about. So as we go out into the world and we're sending out our energy field and our emotional body, and we're tapping in with all the different experiences, and we get all those positive experiences where we're getting this rich, beautiful emotion that we're absorbing. And then we also have those experiences as well that we all know too clearly, the angry person or the crowd where there's all kinds of different crazy energies. And so when we are used to absorbing everything like that, it's really like these constant energetic transfusions that we're having, some of them good, some of them not so good, we start to scan for threats. And this becomes a very natural way of being for people that are highly sensitive, is that they're very aware of what's happening around them because they know if they come across somebody who's really angry. They know if they come across somebody who is really pushy, that it's going to affect them. They're going to feel it through their body. And so our experience is quite different again from people that aren't highly sensitive. You see, people that aren't highly sensitive are not feeling anywhere outside of their body. They're feeling what's happening within them. And so as highly sensitive people, we're tracking all over the place. We try to claim space that really isn't ours whatsoever. We try to claim space that doesn't belong to us. And so as we do that, as we walk through the world, sending our energy field way out and kind of policing it and going, oh, that person's angry, I better push them away, or maybe I need to retreat back. We're constantly adjusting our energy field to make ourselves feel comfortable, to deal with all these so-called threats. Because when you're highly sensitive, everything does seem to feel personal. Everything does feel a bit threatening. So as we send our energy field out, there's this sense for people that are highly sensitive that we're simply scanning and that we are just trying to keep ourselves safe. And there's also a sense where people that are highly sensitive tend to feel a bit of a victim in it. They tend to feel like people around them aren't honoring them. They're not respecting their space. And what's kind of funny as we start to introduce this is I'll watch a lot of people just kind of think about how they experience the world. and really how pushy they can be out there. Because highly sensitive people tend to claim a lot more space than is really appropriate. And it's not something we're doing on purpose. It's just how we naturally know the world. And so when we're out scanning for threats, we tend to have a couple different really clear responses. We either feel the energy is very positive and it lifts us, or we feel it as negative and we can feel it dropping down. And when we feel that negative energy, we go, okay, that's a threat. And so we do one of two main things. We either retreat and go, oh, I don't even want to touch that, and we adjust our energy field, or we go into this warrior mode and we push it away and go, not in my energy field. And it's kind of funny because we just assume that we have a right to be the energetic police. Anything that's low frequency, we have the right to start pushing around. And it's something that we've just naturally done through our lives. So it's not something to feel bad about. It's just one of those things that is a very natural way of being for people who are highly sensitive. And so when you're constantly adjusting your energy field to either push away a threat or retract to retreat from a threat, that's very disempowering. And it also gives space in our energy field for lower frequencies things to hang out. If we're pulling back, there's all this space here for stuff that doesn't match us to stick around. And if we're going into battle with it, quite often the energy starts to battle back. We may find ourselves in situations where we're really in conflict. And so each of those experiences creates its own problems. And what we find is people who are highly sensitive often have an energy field that's just all over the place. And so just like our self-concept being all over the place, it's really connected to that. Our energy field is constantly pushing and pulling. It's never static. It's never staying in one place. It's never just broadcasting our frequency. And so what does that create? It creates experiences that are all over the place. It creates situations in our lives where we're having to deal with people, dealing with experiences that just don't match us. And what makes it also really challenging for us to call in experiences that do, because our energy field is constantly doing this. And so again, that one solution aspect, as we run our energy field where our emotional body is inside feeling who we are, and we do the activations with this where we're actually calling in very specific frequencies that match us, that we get to broadcast, that really truly is us, what that creates is an energy field that becomes very constant. It doesn't fluctuate. It doesn't adjust for everything around us. It doesn't read the world as threatening anymore. It doesn't give us that illusion that we're victims in it. And when that cleans up, as I'm describing this may be hard for you to imagine what that would feel like, but I've taught this to hundreds of people now, and each one of them, watching them go through this experience, it happens so quickly for them. In fact, there's almost like this deja vu that happens when they start to rearrange their energy field in this way. It's almost like they forget that they perceive the world as so much of a threat for so many years, for their whole life. And the changes that happen, the way we clean up our self-concept, the way that we clean up how we hold our energy field, it's pretty awesome, and it happens very, very quickly. So the final challenge I wanted to talk about here is this is kind of a funny one, because we start to kind of tell on ourselves with this. And so it's the concept of meddling. And meddling is what we do when we start to feel uncomfortable. And so meddling isn't necessarily coming up with a plan and creating something. Meddling is the experience we have when we are feeling uncomfortable, when we want to alleviate that discomfort, and so we take action to the action that is based on alleviating the discomfort, not creating something that we're really moving forward towards in a very deliberate way. And so one of the funny stories that comes up for me with this is I was teaching this workshop, and one of the participants, a young woman who just as sweet as could be, and at the same time, her energy field would push people around. She was constantly kind of adjusting things around her to make herself feel safe, to make herself feel comfortable, as all of us highly sensitive people are. And people would get upset with her, and she couldn't quite figure out why, and I'm sure we can all share that experience, right? So a little while into our workshop, I think it was after the second class, she had gone to the grocery store, and she was really proud of herself. She was doing this great work with keeping herself within herself, with really broadcasting her energy, but not having her emotional body out, pushing people around. She was just really tapping in with what her frequency was, working with her activations, and just broadcasting herself. And she loved to be out around people then because it just felt so good. So she gets her cart and goes to walk in, and there's this woman walking really slowly in this really annoying way in front of her. And she's like, I don't understand what's happening. It's not part of my normal experience. People just kind of move out of my way. And she realized she wasn't meddling. She wasn't out pushing people around. And so it's kind of a funny story. Sure, this is one of the maybe the negative side effects of it, but it was really clear to her how much she'd been pushing, how many people she had pushed around. And it wasn't something that she wanted to do. It was very easy for her to just go around this woman. But her experiences before was she never had to go around the woman. She would just push her with her energy field. She was out meddling. And so we meddle in so many different ways. And as you're listening to this, you might be coming up with some ideas about, okay, yeah, I can feel how I push energy around here, or I create this situation. But the way that you're really going to discover it is after you listen to this video and you go out and start living your life, you're going to start to catch yourself pushing and pulling and adjusting your energy field, because it's one of those things when it's on autopilot, when we're just naturally doing what we're doing, we really don't realize how much we do it and how big a habit it is and how much it's just part of who we are. And all those stories that we tell ourselves about victimhood, about how people got upset with us for no good reason, they don't seem to hold water quite the same. And it's not that that's a bad thing. And in fact, I think most people, as they start to experience that and start to see themselves very clearly in the way that they've used that pushing and pulling, that meddling energy, they kind of start to laugh, because there's the story they've been telling themselves for so long, all of a sudden doesn't feel so threatening. All of a sudden they recognize, wow, this is the role I played in it. And so we meddle in so many different ways. It's really just whenever we find discomfort and we want to alleviate that discomfort, we start meddling. And so the work that we do with this, because highly sensitive people love to have something to do. Whenever we feel like things aren't the way we want them to be, it's so easy for us to adjust our energy. And so we start pushing and pulling. And so the work that we do with this, the detaching our emotional body from the exterior, from tapping into everything, and really tapping into ourselves, and doing the activations that come with this, that is the doing that we get to do. And when we do that, all of a sudden we stop meddling, we catch ourselves. And instead of meddling, instead of creating a bunch of things where we're just turning knobs and dials and flipping switches that we don't know what they're actually creating, we're just going, I want something different because I'm uncomfortable right now. And when we stop doing that and we go within ourselves and align with ourselves, then we start to really manifest in a clear way. We start to create an energy field around us that just changes things. It really is about being in solution. It's about moving forward in a way that is in complete alignment with ourselves. And so it also, another nice side effect is it makes our relationships a lot easier. It takes a lot of the stress away in ways that we were creating challenges that we had no idea. And any of us that are highly sensitive, I can guarantee you that, because I've spoken with so many people, have a lot of ways where we have stories about our life where we felt like we were in victimhood, where we felt like we were really being treated unfairly. And yes, that's true for everybody, but highly sensitive people have a ton of those stories. And the truth is, so much of that just cleans right up when we stop pushing and pulling, because sure, it can be hard to accept that we played a role in it, even a big role. But the good news is, if we are playing the role and we stop doing it, we can change our life in such miraculous and really dramatic ways. So I want to invite you to share kind of the first activation that comes with this. And this is really where I start with people when I'm working with them in this workshop, is teaching them how to disengage from our extrasensory. And so part of our extrasensory is our emotional body that's out receiving all this information. And those of us that are highly sensitive, we're very clear as we get in touch with this that we live outside of our bodies quite a bit, that we're constantly out feeling and moving energy around. And really how it doesn't serve us. And so this isn't about giving up any of our broadcasting of energy, but it's giving up the processing of it. And so the first activation that I do is teaching people how to disconnect temporarily. And so when we disconnect temporarily, we're really letting go of that multi-sensory aspect of ourselves, that multi-dimensional aspect of ourselves. And we take a few minutes just to go into a very clear three-dimensional place, a place where we're only dealing with our five senses. And for a lot of people, at first it feels like, oh my God, this is such a nice break. It's so nice to not have this constant flow of information coming in. And then after they're there for a minute, they're like, wow, wait a minute. I also don't feel very connected. I don't feel that flow of energy that I'm used to, that it feels much more like I'm just stuck in this little bubble. And so when we go there, we're really experiencing what it's like for the majority of the population who is just simply living in the third dimension, who's simply just living with five senses where they receive all their information. And it seems like people either go there and they just start dying laughing because it makes so much sense to them. All the people that they've gotten so angry with or so judgmental about, that to experience the level of consciousness where they're living, to experience what it feels like to be in that level of consciousness, it really is eye-opening, and it makes the world make so much more sense. And it also makes ourselves make so much more sense, because as highly sensitive people, we've always been multisensory, we've always been multidimensional. So we've never had that experience of what it feels like to just be in that little bubble. And at first it feels great, like I was saying, because we don't have that constant influx of information. But then we also realize there's just so little direction there. There is just so little information that it really becomes up to us to make ourselves feel better. And up to us to make ourselves feel like we have some purpose here. And those of us that are highly sensitive, we're always full of purpose. We're always feeling how much of an impact we have on the world. And so please do go ahead and click through, and I'd love to send you this first activation, this first experience of getting to feel what it feels like, become fully third-dimensional, become fully five-sensory, and step outside of the world as you know it for a few minutes.